I have a confession to make, and I'm hoping that this confession can stay just between us girls. The feeling that we're going to talk about today is a feeling that God has been dealing with me for quite some time. Today we're going to talk about the feeling of envy. Yeah, envy. And I was talking to a pastor friend the other day, and I was telling him about my struggle with envy. And he said real quickly, "You struggle with envy?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I do. I'm just shooting it straight. I need somebody to tell. I struggle with envy." And he said, "Man, I do too. And if I'm honest, I thought I was the only one. And if you're honest, you probably think you're the only one. Because envy is a secretive emotion. You don't walk around announcing your envy. You don't walk around telling people as you creep on them, 'I'm envious of you. I'm envious. I'm watching you, I'm measuring you, I'm checking you out. And dang, I'm envious of that car. And I'm envious of that house." You know, we all probably struggle with envy in different ways. I don't struggle in envy with material possessions. I just don't. Maybe some of you do. What I struggle with in envy is not any better than that. It's just different. But I don't struggle with possessions and envying people's possessions. If someone had a $90,000 Lund fishing boat, I'd be very happy for that guy. I'd high-five him. I'd tell him to take me fishing, but I wouldn't be envious of that guy. Somebody could have a brand new truck, and I'd be very happy for that person. I'm good with rolling in my 2004 truck. I'll drive it till the wheels fall off. I don't struggle with envying possessions. But do you know what I do struggle with when it comes to envy? I'm going to tell you later. But I promise you I'll tell you. But when you think about envy is a voyeuristic emotion. Think about it for a minute. Envy is a voyeuristic feeling. And when you think about it that way, it's a little bit creepy, isn't it? When you're envious of someone or something that they have, you're essentially a voyeur into their life. And most of the time, they have no idea that you're envious of them. And so you're scrolling and you're envious. You're watching them at a distance and you're envious. And it's voyeuristic to be envious. So why don't you do this just real quickly? Turn to your neighbor and say, "Stop creeping." Because envy, when you really think about it, it's a creepy thing. And what I've learned about envy, as God has really been dealing with me about this feeling in my life, is that envy has an engine, and it's fueled by two things. It's fueled by comparison, and it's fueled by competition. It's fueled by comparison and competition. Think about it. Anything that you're envious of is driven by one of those two things. Let's say you're invited over to a friend's house for a barbecue, and you walk into the front door, and instantly you begin to notice the finish out of their home. And you begin to notice that they have granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. They have a Viking refrigerator, and they have gas, stoves. And you begin to be envious. Why? Because what you're doing is you're comparing. You're beginning to compare your laminate countertops to their granite countertops. You're beginning to compare your white refrigerator that you've had for 14 years to their nice, shiny, stainless steel refrigerator, right? Like we struggle with envy. And that kind of envy is driven by comparison. We all do it. And it's unfair to compare, but we all do. We compare what people have to what we have. And there's others of you here today, maybe you just got a new ride. Maybe you got a new truck and you're feeling pretty good about that truck, and you're like, "Man, I closed that deal, I made the money, and I'm the man. I am the man." And you feel like the man when you drive that truck, don't you? You feel like the man. I mean, the radio doesn't have to be on. You've got that soundtrack in your head. I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man. Yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. Yeah, I'm the man. Like, you walk out, something about a new car, you just walk out, you're like, I'm the man. I'm the man. And you think, and he's not so much the man, because look at his 2004 truck, but I'm the man. I'm the man. And what is that all about? That's all about being competitive, right? That's being competitive. Or maybe you're a real estate agent. I know there's a lot of those in this town. And the market's good right now, so it's for that. And let's say you had the opportunity to help a friend close on their dream house. And man, it was a blessing to them and is a blessing for you, and you're excited about it, and they're excited about it, and you close the deal, and they get the keys, and you sit down for a breather. You're feeling pretty content. You're feeling pretty celebratory, but then all of a sudden, you open up Facebook, and you see another real estate agent has done the same thing, and they have also closed on a house of someone that's their dream house, but yet that house is bigger than the house that you sold. And all of a sudden, what happens? That envy engine, right? It heats up. It gets going. And we fuel it because of comparison, and we fuel it through competition. And the fastest way to kill your contentment is to compare it to something else. Compare what it is that you're happy with in a moment. Compare what it is that you feel good about in a moment, and instantly you're going to grow discontent. Because wherever envy begins, contentment ends. You should write that down. Wherever envy ends or begins, wherever envy creeps into your feelings and begins to pull on you, right there in that moment, your contentment ends. I was thinking about that yesterday. I was thinking about it quite a lot. And I was thinking about the decisions in my life that I've made that are often driven by envy. I mean, if I'm real honest about it, some of the decisions that I've made even this week, if I was just like very open with you, were driven by envy. And God's been really dealing with me about this feeling of envy. And I'm hoping today that the net effect of our time together, as we get into God's Word, and I'm raw about what it is that God's dealing with me in this area of my life, I just pray that He would speak to you. If this is an area in your life that you're wrestling with, here's what I pray. I pray that He exposes it as He's exposing it to me. I pray that it's open. I pray that you'll let the light and the truth into this area of your life, because envy is destructive. There's a difference between envy and jealousy. Jealousy is when you are afraid of losing something. This is why God says that He has a jealous love for you. He doesn't want to lose you. So in some ways, jealousy at times can be a good thing. But envy's different than jealousy. Envy is when someone has something more or something else other than what you have, and you look at them with disdain. You want to have more for you and less for them. So envy is driven by you not having something. Envy is driven by maybe a sense of you lacking something in your life. And envy is never good. The Apostle Paul talks about the danger of comparing. He talks about the danger of you and I when we live our lives in a way in which we're always looking over and comparing ourselves with them. Let's look at it together in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12. It says, "We do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves." In other words, they think highly of themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not what? They're not wise. One translation says that they're foolish. Another translation says that they are stupid. I think we get the point. That comparison is not wise. Because when we compare, the envy engine in our life fires up and it begins to pull us around. We've been talking about our feelings taking us for a walk, right? How our feelings we wake up, and depending on what we're feeling, they take us for a walk. And I think in my life, there are times where I will allow envy to pull me around. The engine of envy in my life at times, man, it can sound like a V8. You know, it can be a powerful engine in my life. And this is why Paul says, listen, you're foolish when you compare. You're foolish when you look at somebody else's life and what they have and compare it to you, or where they are in their place of life and you compare it to where you are in life. And here's why Paul says that it's foolish, that it's not wise. Because when you find yourself comparing, when you find yourself being competitive, this is the place that envy puts you. It either makes you feel inferior or superior. Think about it. It either makes you feel inferior, less than. You're like, pretty proud of the 10 lbs that you've lost. You're pretty proud of it. But then you get onto Instagram and you see that skinny little girl, standing there, and she's lost 20 pounds because she's got this skin wrap, and, she's like, and this is the pose in case you were wondering, okay? This, you got to suck it all in. This is the 20-pound weight loss pose right here, right? And now all of a sudden, you feel inferior. You were feeling pretty good about those 10 pounds you lost, but now you saw the 20-pound girl, and now all of a sudden you feel inferior. You feel inferior, or maybe you feel superior. Maybe you see your car and you pull up with the soundtrack in the back of your mind. I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man. And you pull up to some old jalopy and you're feeling pretty good. You're like, I earned this money for this truck. I am the man, and I feel superior than you. I'm better than you because my truck is nicer than your truck. Envy makes us either feel inferior or superior, and neither one honors God. And this is the issue of envy. When we are envious of others, it's dishonoring to God. And it's just simply not fair. We oftentimes compare our behind-the-scene footage with someone else's highlight reel. You see, here's what is tricky about envy. There is the real you, and then there is the ideal you. The real you is the picture that you took the first time. The ideal you is the 20th picture that you posted. Okay? The real you is the one that you're very aware of, the weaknesses that you have. You know what you look like when you don't have clothes on. Like, you're very aware of the real you. And the ideal you is what you project to everyone, that you want everyone to think about you. It's the pictures that you post. It's the way that you carry yourself in public. It's how you treat your wife when everyone's looking. But the real you is who you are when no one is looking. And here's the danger. Not only is there the real you and the ideal you, it's true of everyone here. Every one of us are walking around with the real us, but also in our minds, the ideal us. And we're all projecting constantly the ideal us to everyone. So I'm projecting to you the ideal me right now. Right? It's just me. The ideal me. And what's dangerous is what we'll do is in the back of our minds, we walk around very well of the real us, and yet we compare ourselves to the ideal everyone else. And it doesn't honor God. Because you feel either inferior in that moment or superior in that moment. And God wants you to know that He has created you uniquely, specifically, with a destiny, with a purpose and a calling on your life that is unique and it's different than your neighbor, the person you're sitting by, the person you're married to, your best friends, the people that you Insta-stalk. It's different. It's different. And so when we compare or when we find ourselves in the place of being competitive, you see, this is what I do. I'm just shooting it straight. Because for us, envy is either about the ER or the EST. I don't struggle so much with the ER. Okay, some of y'all struggle with the ER. And you struggle with the And so you're going through Instagram and you're just thinking, man, I want to be bigger and better and smarter and richer, prettier, cooler, hipper. And it's all about comparison. If I could just be more than her, then we're good. It's the It's the It's the Some of us are people. For me, where I struggle with envy is that I'm not just I'm est. It's got to be the biggest, the smartest, the best lookingest, the wisest, the most influential est. It's the est. Why? Because I cloak it in being competitive. Oh yeah, fellas, we like to say we're competitive, right? And so much of our decisions is all driven about being the biggest, being the smartest, being the richest. Right? It's the est. It's the est. And you know, I suppose for me, if I'm being honest, this started early on for me in my life. My father was a pretty put-together guy, a pretty demanding guy, amazing dad. I had a phenomenal father. But even as a little boy, and some of this is good, but even as a little boy, I would constantly look to see if my dad was watching. Because I think more than anything, I wanted his approval. I wanted him to say, good job. I wanted to hear his applause. I wanted to look up and see. I would take my eyes off the game to see if he was in the stands. And what this has driven in me is, I think it's created some good things about my character, but it's also created some very destructive things about my character, and I cloak it in being competitive. And really, when I look at it, it's about envy. It's about envy. It's about wanting more and more est, and being big or big est. I wonder for you, like, what is it? Is it the or the est? Like, identify it today. Like, let's expose envy for what it is. And I'm hoping, as I'm just shooting it straight about my struggle with envy, that it'll cause you to be a little bit more open about this, because here's what's so true about envy. It's a secretive feeling. We don't want anyone to know that we're envious. We don't want anyone to know that we wrestle with envy. Because I don't want just what you have, I want more of what you have. And I don't want just what you've done, I want to do it bigger than you've done. Better than you've done. I've got to have the biggest house, the biggest bank account, the biggest boat, the biggest office, the biggest. It's the or the est. And in this series, we're just talking about how our feelings, oftentimes, if we'll allow them, will reveal what's really driving us. And man, God has just been messing with me on this emotion, this feeling of envy. And I'm not liking what I'm seeing. Like, what makes us do this? What makes us compare? What makes us scroll and find ourselves discontent? 1 minute you could be having a great day. You come home, you're feeling pretty satisfied about your work. You're feeling pretty good about what you've done in the day. And you begin to scroll or you begin to talk to your neighbor, and all of a sudden you compare or you get into a competitive mode, and your day is ruined. Ruined. There's some moms here today that every day you get to the end of the day and you disqualify yourself as being a good mom because you're looking at a mom on Pinterest. Come on, really? Really? Like, you're looking at oh man, the pictures they post and the ideal them they project, and then you disqualify yourself and you get down on yourself, and all of a sudden you feel like you're just a mess. You're just a mess. Listen, when we envy, we feel either inferior or superior, and neither what? Neither honors God. Neither one honors God. And so it's never been easier in all of history than to compare like it is today. Thank you, Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, Pinterest. Thank you, Twitter. It's never been easier to compare. And how you define yourself, and this is at the core of what it's all about. How you define yourself has to do with your ideals, your values, and your ambitions. How you see yourself, how you define yourself. And again, that's where it gets tricky. And so what we do is we walk around and we're constantly measuring. Some of y'all are like, why in the world has he got a measuring tape? Pace has lost it. He's got a measuring tape. It's just a little creative tension right there. What we do is we walk around and we measure. We measure all the time. I'm going to ask my boy Dakota to come up onto the stage. Y'all give it up for Dakota. Let's just say, just for example, that I wanted to be like Dakota. And what I would do is I would watch Dakota from afar. I would look at that cool H&M flannel shirt. And I would think, I need to get me one of those. And I would begin to, voyeuristically watch his life because I want to be like Dakota. And I would look at his pants and go, man, I don't think I could fit in them, but I want to be like him, so I got to get some pants. And this is what I'm doing. I'm measuring Dakota, okay? Because I want to be Dakota. I want to be a hipster worship leader. And so I measure Dakota, and I measure me. And here's when envy strikes up. When I come up short. When I'm not him. And here's what I do. When I'm not like something I want to be, or when I don't have something I want, here's what I'm going to do. Skinny hipster. I'm either going to diminish it, make fun of it. Bro, I couldn't fit in those pants. My arms are bigger than your legs. I'm either going to diminish it, try to make him feel smaller. Why? Because it makes me feel bigger. So I'll make him feel inferior so I can be superior. Do you see why envy doesn't honor God? Thank you, Dakota. Do you see why it doesn't honor God? And that's a silly illustration, but let that play out in the way that you live your lives and the things that you compare and the things that you struggle and the things that you look at in people from afar and a distance. Maybe it's a house. Maybe it's a stage of life. Maybe it's an amount of money. Maybe it's a style of living. Maybe you're looking, voyeuristically at a marriage and you're unfairly comparing your marriage to another marriage, and you just thought, man, if I was married to her or if I was married to him, if our marriage was just like that, well, if he would just do this or if she would just do that, then things would be different. And what you're doing is you are unfairly measuring. You're unfairly measuring. And it's dishonoring God. And what you find yourself doing is you grow to discontentment. And when you find yourself in a place of discontentment, you will find yourself in a place of distrusting God. You begin to distrust God. You begin to take your eyes off the race He's asked you to run. I love what Proverbs 14:30 says. It says, a heart of peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Envy rots the bones. I think if envy had a smell, it'd smell like rotten eggs. Because when I'm envious and I catch myself being envious, looking at somebody with an envious eye, I'm a rotten person. I think less of myself or less of them. And I'm either going to push them down or push myself up, but I'm going to push. Because this is what envy drives us to do. Envy creates a why not me mood. Why not me? Why not me? If only I had. Must be nice. Like, why not me? Why do they get? Why does she have? Why does he get to? Why not me? And what you'll do is you'll take your eyes off what's most important in a moment because you are so busy thinking about why not me? Why do we do this? Why are we driven this way? Well, very simply put, our sinful nature. We are sinful human beings. And the sin side of us wants to push us away from God's best in our life. The sin side of us wants to push us away from the heart of God, and it wants us to elevate ourselves and push others down. The devil himself was once the lead worship leader in heaven. What did he want to do? He wanted to usurp himself. He wanted to be over God. He wanted a position that only God would forever have. And so he was envious. He looked at God with an envious eye, and he began to want to take control, and he wanted to push down. He wanted to rise above God, and he said stuff like, I this and I that, and this is what will happen to you. This is what will happen to me if we let envy take control. It's in us all. It's our sinful nature. And remember, we talked about this last week. This is what we're doing when we are driven by envy, a feeling of envy. We feel inadequate. We feel like maybe we don't matter. We feel like that maybe we don't measure up in a certain way, or we're not in the right neighborhood, or we're not driving the right car, or we're not in the position we thought we would be in at this stage in life. And so what we do is we seek something externally to try to feel something internally. Like there's something missing on the inside of us, and we think if I can just get something on the outside to bring to the inside, then I'll feel better about myself. Students, you do this all the time unknowingly. It's how you compare yourselves to your friends. It's constantly wondering where you are and where they are, and it's what drives fear of missing out. It's just a constant drive of envy. It's a constant drive of really dishonoring God, of inferiority, feeling inferior or feeling superior. And this is what I want to say to you today. There is nothing on the outside that you can bring to the inside that's going to fill the hole. Nothing. There are not enough likes. There's not enough popularity. There's not a big enough house and a big enough salary. Someone was like, well, I sure would like to try that. It's not big enough. Because what it is that you're trying to feel inside of you is a hole or a void in your life that is placed there by God in hopes that you would seek Him and find Him because He's not far. Like this is how God has wired you and wired me. And so we have internal questions that are driving us all the time. Am I good enough? Do I belong? Am I loved? Am I respected? Do I matter? Do I really matter? If I disappeared today, would anybody notice? These are all internal questions that we're asking. And the dangerous thing is as you're asking those questions, do I matter? If you looked at somebody else's matter and said, well, I don't matter as much as he matters. And I don't feel like I belong as much as she belongs. And you find yourself doing anything and everything to make you feel like you matter more. And anything and everything to find belonging. And God is with us today as we turn a light onto our vulnerability of being envious. And He says, I'm the only one. I'm your creator. I have knit you together. And here's the defining question we all have to ask. And we all have to answer. Who or what will determine my worth? Who or what is going to determine my worth? It's a question that I think a lot of us know is one that we need to answer. But if we can get to the bottom of that, like who or what? Is a paycheck going to define my worth? Is a position in life? Is a certain level of influence and popularity going to define my worth? If you answer to anything other than Jesus, of what will define your worth, you're going to come up always on the losing end. Jesus is the only one. And here's the thing. I know, those of you that are Christ followers, you're like, well, duh. Like, it took you that long to get us to that point? And yet you say you know that, but yet you struggle with envy. And you let other things define your worth. You let other people define your well-being and your identity. In a few weeks, I'm starting a series called World War Me. And it's a series about what I think is one of the greatest challenges of all of us, and it's our identity. It's the battles within. It's the things that we say to ourselves, the lies that we believe. And I want to challenge you to begin to think about that and don't miss being a part of this series, because I thought we were going to go to another series, and I thought the more I've studied this and the more God has been doing work in my heart about my feelings, at the core of that is value, and at the core of that is identity. And who am I, and who does God say I am, and the battles that I face in my mind and in my heart. So there's a guy named King David, and I'll use this story as a way of closing. A guy named David. He eventually becomes the king of Israel. Before him was a guy named Saul. Most of you, if you're familiar with the Bible, are familiar with these two characters. Saul was a guy who was chosen by God. And God favored him. And God moved through him in a mighty way. But then came a little small shepherd boy named David. And Saul and his army were facing a great army one day. And here comes this little boy from a field, and there's this giant, a Philistine, and David slays this giant with a sling, and instantly David becomes a national hero. And instantly, Saul begins to take his eyes off of God's calling on his life, what God has invited him into, and the thing that God called him to do. And he began to put his eye on David. I want you to see this real quick. 1 Samuel 18, beginning in verse 6. It says, when the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet with King Saul with singing and dancing and with joyful songs and with timbrels and lyres. And as they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. And you can sort of hear it with the beat, can't you? Right? Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. I'm going to get the measuring out. 10,000, thousand. He's got 10,000. They're saying I got 1,000. Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. And all of a sudden, the envy engine fires up in Saul's life. Envy will cause you to keep a close eye on the wrong thing, and you'll lose sight of the right thing. 1 Samuel 18, while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did, Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to him, I'll pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. If you look back in verse 9, Saul says, what more can he get than the kingdom? And this guy's got all the popularity now. Everybody thinks he's the man. That used to be my song. Now it's his song. And from that time on, here it is. Saul kept a what? Close eye. What's your eye on today? What's your eye on today? Before I moved here, I had the opportunity to be in some pretty influential circles, at least in the church world. Probably doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but for me, you know, a lot of the pastors that maybe some of you look up to at a distance, or you've seen, maybe you listen to their podcast. And I used to be in those circles of influence. And part of our story in moving here was stepping out of that circle and stepping what seems to be like off the grid. And I'll just be honest with you today. There are times when I see that circle gather where I used to be influential, and I get envious. And it's not because of where they are. It's not even so much of what they're doing. I've been in the green room and I've been on large stages and in front of thousands of people. It's not that. You know what it is? When I look at them at times, when I'm driven by envy, I feel like my voice doesn't matter anymore. I feel like I've lost my influence. And envy kicks in. And I don't want less for them. But when envy fires up in my heart, I sure do want more for me. There are times where maybe back before I moved here, I had opportunities to speak into some different environments, influential environments, and there's times where I see guys in that place where I used to be, and envy kicks in. And that's not so much about the speaking, but you know what it is that bothers me, if I'm just being transparent and being honest? It comes down to this again. I just sort of feel like my voice isn't making a difference. Envy is a liar. The Bible says that you and I have a race marked out for us, set out for us, appointed to us. And what the enemy would do through envy is make you take your eyes off your calling and put it on someone else and compare. You know what my race is? To honor God and my family. You know what my race is? It's to be a part of a move of God through One Place Church in the Pacific Northwest. It's to plant more churches in the Northwest region of the United States. That's the call on my life. And what the enemy would love me to do is to look over here and see a circle I used to be in gather and me get envious and take my eyes and focus on that and focus over here and take my energy over here and miss my energy with my family and miss my investment into our community and miss my investment into this city and region. And all week long, here's what I've heard God telling me: run your race. You run your race. I'll take care of the rest, but you run your race. And that's what I want to say to you today. Run your race. Quit looking at everyone else's race. Quit comparing your steps with another man's steps. Quit comparing the way you parent to another person's parenting. Quit comparing. Quit being so competitive. Quit letting the engine of envy fire up in your life and drag you down, pull you down. It's destructive. You know how Saul's life ended? Saul's life, he took his eyes off of God's best. He put his eyes on David. It drove him insane. He lost the favor of God on his life. And that's where